Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Cole of Pirates Digital Media. The Pirate People podcast is available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio, and on our YouTube channel, Pirates Digital Media. Our purpose for the podcast is to give you a little bit deeper dive into some of the people in and around North Central Missouri College. And now some quick NCMC and Pirate Digital Media news before we get to today's guest, freshman Zoe Chrisman of Brookfield, Missouri. North Central Missouri College women's basketball, just like the men's basketball last week, was affected by the COVID protocol this week and had to postpone Monday night's game at Fort Scott to January 5th. As we record this podcast, the game next Monday night at Highland, Kansas, could be in jeopardy, but a decision has yet to be made. Our women are also traveling to Florida late next week. We also want to take note of Lindsay Batson, who was named the NCMC Student of the Month. Lindsay is from Princeton, Missouri. Kind of a big deal personally to me. Lindsay was one of our first Pirate Digital Media broadcast crew and is largely responsible for much of what you see during our sports telecast this winter. Congratulations, Lindsay. Lindsay's also a third baseman for the Pirates softball team. Our guest today, Zoe Chrisman, is a softball player as well. And now it's Zoe Chrisman on the Pirate People podcast. We welcome Zoe Chrisman in for our podcast today. Zoe is a member of our North Central Missouri College broadcast staff that brings you athletics. Plus, she's an athlete herself. She plays softball here at North Central. But we're going to start out talking today about high school wrestling, especially for girls, because you were a wrestler in high school, and you just watched your old team wrestle this weekend, right?
Yep.
How'd they doing? What'd that feel like to watch them?
They did really well, actually. My wrestling partner, Oscarina, actually got first at the tournament, and so that felt really good. As a team, they all did really well. It was nice to see more girls out on the team, and just feels good knowing that the program I was a part of is starting to build.
What point did they add the girls wrestling to high school wrestling?
That would have been my sophomore year. I did not participate that year, so that would have been 2019, I believe.
Okay. So it was, 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
So since you're a freshman at college.
Mm-hmm.
When you heard about wrestling for the first time for girls in high school, what was your reaction?
I thought it was really cool, but I didn't consider it for myself right away. I didn't really think it was right for some reason, but I was still playing basketball, and I felt like I would let down my team if I switched to another sport.
You have had at that point, a history of playing with the guys a little bit, because you were a football player, and from what I hear, a pretty good one. And we're talking about Brookfield, Missouri, where you grew up. You were a football player. You stopped, I think, what year did you stop playing football?
That would have been technically middle school football, so I stopped playing after my 6th grade season.
Okay, and we're going to circle back on this one. But so when the idea of wrestling came up, you didn't want to let your basketball teammates down. What made you pursue it the next year?
So actually, I was in a health class, and the teacher was one of the wrestling coaches, is Coach Dill, and he really nagged at me for a long time and really inspired me to give it a try. He would always say that I was aggressive and that I'd be a good fit for the team, and that really sat with me, and I thought about it, and that really pushed me to consider it.
Yeah, he was kind of recruiting you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you made that decision to pursue it. What went into that besides you didn't want to disappoint your basketball teammates?
Basketball really wasn't a fit for me. I loved the sport, but the team situation wasn't working out for me, and so I was really considering a change, and I didn't want to just quit, because my parents always taught me you finish what you start, or you don't quit, and so I didn't want to just quit basketball and not do anything, so I thought this would be a really good chance for me to try something new and still be involved, and my parents were really encouraging with that decision as well.
I think I'm accurate on this, but in the winter season, okay, in high school, there really aren't many options for girls other than basketball, are there?
Right.
Athletically?
Yeah, it's especially in a small town like Brookfield, I think, which, yeah, you're right, it was basketball and then now wrestling, but there's basketball, cheerleading, and coquettes, but since we don't have dual sports, you really just have one option, like, when it comes down to it. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the band as well, so I got
okay.
to do, like, pet band at basketball games, so it was easy to get involved if you wanted to.
Yeah. Okay, so you make the decision that wrestling might be a good thing. You run that by your parents. What was their reaction?
My mom was really excited.
She was?
Yes, she was very excited for me, and my dad used to wrestle, when he was younger, and so they were just really supportive and excited about the whole thing. They knew I could do it, and they were excited to see a change, and they had knew that I wasn't happy in basketball, so
Yeah.
they wanted to see a change. And
Is your dad one of those guys who used to like pin you to the floor when you were a little kid and wrestle with you?
yeah, even even now, I mean, sometimes we'll just be messing around and end up, wrestling around on the ground.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, he's just one of those guys I could always mess with. He didn't treat me like a girl,
Yeah. Well, okay, after you got done wrestling, were you better at wrestling him than you were before?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But still, he's a big guy.
Yeah, because he was wrestling, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. All right, so you make the decision, your mom and dad are good with it, and then comes the first day of practice. What was that like walking in?
I was really excited but nervous at the same time. So I was just, there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to trying something new, and especially with wrestling, I felt like I had a lot of expectations for some reason going into it, just because I quit a sport that I'd been playing since I was younger. So going into the first practice, I was excited and nervous. I just wanted to see what it was all about, which that summer we had a camp and stuff to get started to kind of learn some basics, so we didn't just jump in.
All right, so you had some
Fine.
experience on the mat and a little bit going in practice.
Not much, though.
Okay, so
not much at all.
That first moment in camp, what was the first drill or what was the first thing they taught you?
Learning how to shoot, probably. No, actually, it was our stance, just like any other sport, your regular, stance and
The
stuff.
one where you're the stand-up position?
Yeah.
Or on your knees, which
No,
both?
we were on our feet, learning how to circle and where your hands go and how to move your feet. So it felt a little silly, just something I'd never done before. And there were several other girls there that didn't end up wrestling, so maybe we weren't taking it too seriously, and because we were embarrassed, we were just trying to laugh about it and stuff. But it really did help in the long run.
Yeah. How many other young ladies were involved that first year you were involved?
At the beginning, there was probably 8, maybe, I want to say. And then towards the end, I think it ended up just being, I want to say 2 or 3 of us.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. Well, maybe that first year there ended up, I don't think we started with very many at all, actually. I think my second year we actually started with 8 or 11.
Wow.
And ended up with 5 or 6, maybe.
How many do they have this year?
Oh, they have a bunch this year. I can't remember. Maybe upwards of 10.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, super.
The wrestling room's packed this year, I've heard.
Yeah. Zoe Chrisman is our guest. It's the Pirate People podcast, and she's a freshman here at North Central, but is from Brookfield, Missouri. We're talking about her high school wrestling career. You made it to state, right?
Yes.
Tell us the whole story of that season and qualifying for state.
So my senior season, I was really excited, but I was nervous a little bit because I had knee surgery the previous summer, so I was a little bit leery about how things would go, if anything would be different. And they changed the weight classes too my senior year, so I went up a little bit from my previous year. But anyway, I just went into the season pretty positively, looking forward to just giving it all my senior season. And I wrestled really well throughout the regular season, and
What was your record?
Ooh.
Oh, maybe I should just let you tell the story.
Oh, well, my record was probably maybe like 17 and 3 maybe.
Wow.
And I only lost to, I think, 2 or 3 girls, and I know exactly, I can see their faces, but the specific girl, she was from Marshall, and I faced her first at the Marshall tournament, and she gave me a run for my money. She was really good and really aggressive, and I lost her that day at the Marshall tournament, and it really put things into perspective because, I mean, usually I would just count on overpowering girls in my matches, and I couldn't do that this time. She was very technically sound and knew what she was doing, and so I just knew what I had to improve on, and I had faced her a couple times in regular season, and I lost to her. And then another girl from Hamilton, I believe it was, and it was the same story. And my coach actually gave me a nickname, called me the Turtle, because I couldn't get off my back.
Oh, those wrestling coaches.
Yeah, so that really stuck for a while, and but I knew that I had to do, and I worked hard in the wrestling room, and going through districts, I had to face the Hamilton girl again. I didn't have to face the Marshall girl in districts, but I lost to the Hamilton girl, and I ended up getting 3rd in districts, which you had to get 3rd to move on. And then because of COVID, they added a sectional tournament as well, so you had to get through that, not only districts. So that was another obstacle because my previous year, you just had to get through districts and you went to state.
Yeah.
So I had the sectional tournament, and it was kind of the same story. I got 3rd and went on. It was a really good tournament. And before I lose track of this, my wrestling partner, Oscarina, she actually was Brookfield High School's first ever district champion for girls.
Right.
I was so proud of her. She did really well.
And where is she from?
She's from Venezuela.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
She moved here to Brookfield, I think her freshman year. I'm not exactly sure, but.
And isn't she still on the team this year?
Oh yes. Yeah. It took some convincing, but she came back, and she's doing really well. I'm very proud of her. But so we both made it through districts and sectionals, and both of us together were the first 2 girls from Brookfield ever to qualify for the state tournament.
That's great.
So we were just very excited in that in general. And if our season would have ended there, I mean, we would have been so proud. But we wanted more.
And you got more. You went to Independence, to the event center there, right? That's where state was held that year.
Yeah, it was on this ice hockey rink, and it was really big. Did
they leave the ice underneath it? Did they cover the ice?
They covered it.
Okay, it was cold, wasn't it? That you could feel that through the floor.
No, you really couldn't. I couldn't tell a difference.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure. They might have melted it. I'm not sure.
Well, I know in some basketball arenas where we've gone, that the floor just covers the ice rink.
Yeah.
And so you can feel the coldness.
And it might have been that way, but I couldn't tell.
Anyway.
So. Going into the state tournament, we were both really excited. Oscarina and I and our coaches were really happy for us and in general about making it there, but we wanted more, like I said, and so our coaches had a game plan for us every match. They always knew exactly what to tell us, or sometimes nothing at all. Just go out there and give it your all. And my first match, I went out there, and this girl was, I kid you not, probably a foot taller than me, which I'm 5'3", so that doesn't say much, but
another former basketball player, no doubt.
This girl was tall, and she had a lot of leverage on me, and she got me on my back, and I couldn't get up, and I got pinned that first match, and so I was pretty discouraged, and it was double elimination, so I knew I couldn't lose again. So it was a lot of pressure right then and there off the get-go to buckle down and get going. So there's probably 45 minutes in between each match, and usually the state tournament is broken up into a couple days, how it usually is, but because of COVID, they had it all in one day or something, and So I had about 45 minutes in between each match. And when you have several matches a day, it can get pretty exhausting.
Right.
So it was like I would sit down and I just kind of had a little bit to recoup and I was ready to go again. And so then I ended up wrestling my way back through the loser side, and I wrestled. The next match was actually, if I remember right, the Marshall girl. I faced her again. So that was pretty intimidating. I had never won against her before, and I knew I could. I just had to give it my all, and so that was a lot of pressure going into that, knowing I couldn't lose or else I was done.
Right.
So going into that match, I had that mentality. I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. So I always get nervous right before the matches, and they blow the whistle, and it all just goes, and it just, the adrenaline takes over. And that match, she had me on my back once or twice, and I got up, and then at one point, something came over me, and I shot my double leg, and I took her to the ground, and I pinned her, and it was all just bang, bang, bang right there. And
in the first period, right? Or was it later?
I believe it was the second period. I could be wrong, though. I believe it was the second. But I pinned her, and I remember there's a picture of me. So I just was on my knees, and I just, like, the exhaustion, and I was so proud, and I just sat there.
What a great moment.
Yeah, and I just took it all in, and I could hear my mom screaming in the stands.
I was going to say, you showed me the video of that match, and your mom took it, right?
Yes.
You could hear her kind of coaching you and screaming, and of course she moved a lot when you won, so
yes.
that video bounces
Can't say
around a
much.
little bit. But it was a really good video, and I think your mom did a great job.
Oh, yes. I don't know who lets her film, though, after years of her filming her feet when something exciting happens. But my mom's definitely one of my greatest
Should
supporters.
we recruit her for Pirates Digital Media?
Of course.
Get her out here and do some
Of
camera work?
course.
Okay, good deal. All right. So then what? You're on your knees there, you realize you've won, and what happens next?
So I help her up, I think, and we go back to the circle, and we have to take our ankle bands off and everything, and shake hands, and then I go straight to my coaches. And
Wait, did you say to her, take that?
No.
You didn't say anything like that?
No.
After in our third match, I finally got one. Did you talk a little trash?
No, I think we ended up hugging or something, because I think that might have been her last match that day. So I respect her. She's actually wrestling at Missouri Valley now, and I'm very proud of her. She's a respectable opponent.
Right.
And, I mean, it was...
But if you saw her today, you could kick her butt, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. I'd like to think so, but we'll just leave it at that.
Let's go back to you being a football player.
Okay.
Tell me about when you started and where you played.
So I started in the third grade, actually. So I always looked up to my big brother, Zane, and he played football, and I loved watching him play, and I just was always inspired by that. And when I was little, I actually wanted to be a cheerleader. Like, my mom has pictures of me in little cheerleading outfits, but I don't know. I think I just thought, I want to be like my big brother. And
he was a cheerleader? No, I'm just kidding.
No. But I was like, you don't see any girls playing football.
Right.
I just thought that was it'd be really cool. And so and of course my dad loved it. He was really excited, and so he took me to...
How about your mom? How'd you feel about that?
She loved it too.
Yeah.
She was excited. She just, I think, might have surprised her a little bit.
Yeah.
But she was excited for me, and I think they just always really encouraged me when I wanted to try something different.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that about my parents.
So your dad took you to practice, and what happened?
I don't know. It just all kind of went from there. I mean, it was, I think, weird for the guys at first. They didn't know how to kind of treat me or whatever, but the coaches were always, excuse me, the coaches were always really inclusive or whatever. They never really treated me different. and but they always knew. They just always knew how to handle things, and
Right.
and they were a big reason I was successful in football.
That's great. Yeah, I love to hear that. Obviously, as a former coach, but yeah, what do you recall their names?
Yeah. So there was O.J. Rodriguez, and then there was Coach Sanders, and I mean Kim Pauley.
Right.
It's actually my boyfriend's dad.
Okay.
Just all these coaches, they always played a big role.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you remember them because they need some credit for that. What position did you play?
I was a lineman, mainly offensive lineman, and I was mainly on the right side of the ball, mainly right guard.
Okay. And
Yep.
did you have a lot of what do I want to say? Complex assignments? Was it pretty simple? How'd they coach that up?
It was pretty simple. I mean, you had to learn the plays when they would call the numbers, and that determined which way I had to block my opponent, you know, and they pretty much simplified it. I remember some of my first home games as playing Little League football. I remember I was on offense and I blocked one of my opponents in the back, and they called me on it, and one of my coaches kind of raised his voice a little bit and was like, "You can't do that." And I was like, "I don't know what I'm doing." So I didn't really know, the logistics of the game very much. I was just kind of there. And then obviously I started to pick up on it, and I knew more what was going on behind me
Right.
too. And so it was just a very big learning experience, but I loved every second of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Zoe Chrisman is our guest on the podcast today. She's a freshman at North Central. And we're talking about her time playing male sports at Brookfield when she was growing up there. Let me ask you some questions in general about your experience, whether, playing against guys, whether it was football or wrestling. You've mentioned a couple of things you've taken out of it, but now as a college softball player, were there lessons to be learned there that you can apply to your competitive athletic ventures right now?
Yes, definitely. I think one of the biggest things is no matter what sport you're playing, if you're playing against males or females, you know that there's always going to be something you can work harder at. There's always going to be something that you can learn from and that you can improve upon, and I think it's important to be aware of that and to just always take it with a grain of salt if you have a bad day, and just to move forward, to work harder at it.
You played for, it sounds like a bunch of coaches in football. You played basketball, you wrestled, you've been exposed to a lot of different coaching, I'm sure in softball as well. Mm-hmm. The coaches, the difference in coaches, how do you react as an athlete, having all of these coaches?
So to me, you're right, I have seen a lot of the different coaching styles, and I'm not going to call out any specific coaches, but
Sure.
I react, growing up mainly around the guys, I react really well to yelling as a coach, but strategically, not just in your face all the time yelling, but when it's needed. I mean, if I'm yelled at, I'll take it. I'll take it and move forward and improve on what they're yelling at me for.
You kind of understand, and I was a female coach who made this mistake, that's not, I don't want to say normal, but it's not how a lot of women would react.
Right, yeah, I would say definitely, and I'll give props to anyone who coaches women, because it's not easy. I mean, so a lot of girls, we react differently in different situations, and that can be said for anyone, but I know specifically with women. You can't yell at a lot of girls. I mean, they'll shut down, or they'll, it'll just upset them more than anything. So I think as a coach, it's really important to know your players.
Exactly.
And to know how they'll respond, and to know that you can't coach every kid the same way.
Right.
And I think that's a concept lost a lot today in coaches.
One of the things I tried to do, and it didn't work as well with the young ladies as it did with the guys, is go to a player, you would be a fine example, and say, listen, Zoe, there are going to be times that I need to get on you a little bit more because I need to make a point to the girl next to you, and I can't yell at her because she does what you were talking about. Did that ever happen to you? Do you think that coaches kind of maybe used you to get their point across to other players?
Maybe. I would say I see that more in academics more than anything, honestly.
Really? Oh, tell me about that.
So I would say like the reward systems being put in place now in academics, really they reward kids that maybe aren't the overachievers, and then less the kids that work harder or are statistically the good kids. And then when the good kid does slip up, they're punished.
Yeah.
Or not, rewarded. I see that a lot more in academics where they're made an example of.
Yeah, right.
But I do agree that would be seen in sports. I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah. We're talking about wrestling. One thing that we've always been taught, I've been taught, is like you never ask a woman about her weight, right? Yet that's obviously a huge part of the wrestling programs. Yeah. How did you deal with that? I'm not saying anything except that, I know I'm very sensitive to that because I'm. So how did the girls in general do with that, and how did you do with that?
So, and it's an honest question. That was always a big insecurity of mine going into wrestling. I mean, I've always been insecure about my weight a little bit, and so going into a sport that you're checking your weight every day and sometimes multiple times a day, and you're encouraged to lose the weight, to stay under your weight class, or in some instances gain weight, which can be difficult for people. So
I can attest that. It's not that hard for me.
Right.
I've always wanted a situation in which somebody came to me and said, Rick, you really need to put on a few pounds. Wouldn't that be great?
Right. So, but yeah, going into a sport that is so centered on your weight, it can get hard. I mean, especially like wrestling season has 2 major holidays, maybe 3. You're in the middle of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. So, I mean, it's just always in the back of your mind, like, I have to lose weight, I have to do this. And some people, I know one person in particular, they're almost like they will lose too much weight.
Yeah.
And they're always just worried about it. And so in some instances, especially if you do it the wrong way, there are right ways to do it. It can be really harmful, and mentally it's really hard, especially as a female. Like, I feel like in today's society, females are like pressured to achieve a perfect body.
I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, so looking at a scale every day, that can get really hard, and I found it really hard to just be all eyes on you, because this is a very much individual sport, even though there's a team aspect to it. So it's hard. All eyes are on you, and you're in a singlet, which is just spandex. I mean, you can't hide much, and it's hard. But I mean, our coaches did really well about if not broadcasting our weight, if we didn't want it or whatever, and they did. They didn't treat us much different. I mean, if we needed to stick to our plan, I mean, they helped us with what we needed to do. But yeah, it's hard mentally. I struggled sometimes getting discouraged, but just if you did it the right way. And I was fortunate enough to work with one of my very close friends who actually coached me in track. She helped me cut weight and meal prep and everything, so I was doing it the right way, and so that was awesome. And but yeah, I think the hardest part about the weight aspect for me was after I was in the best shape of my life when I wrestled. So after wrestling season, I felt like I could ease up a little bit, like I didn't have to be so strict, and so probably the hardest part was gaining weight after I made all that progress after the season. Mentally,
you just didn't feel comfortable with that?
Right, yeah.
Not to go all Howard Stern on you here or anything, but did you ever have to wrestle guys in practice? Or?
Yes, actually. So we didn't have to. I mean, it was a lot more common my junior year before COVID and everything was a thing. But yeah, we would wrestle guys because they were more experienced than us. They've been wrestling since they were really young. I mean, they had that experience. They had a lot of times that strength over us. So yeah, I found it really helpful to wrestle the guys just for the experience. It was awkward at first, but then, I mean, we just got used to making our rotations. But mostly I wrestled Oscarina, which was my wrestling partner, and we would switch around with the girls. But it's hard to switch around with girls since there wasn't that many of us, and we didn't want to wrestle a heavyweight class against a lower weight class.
I would think that's true for boys or girls, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
how about the coaches when they needed to demonstrate something? How did they handle that?
So the coaches were very professional about things, and the girls made it very clear that like we understood if like something had to be demonstrated that like we understand that it's strictly sports.
Yeah.
But our coaches were very professional, and if we needed something demonstrated, more often than not, they would demonstrate it on a boy just so we weren't uncomfortable or anything.
Okay.
But at the same time, I know our head coach would show us like ties or something, like just things that weren't too like entangled or anything.
Yeah.
And just because that helped us get the feel for how it should be. And to me, like, from an outside person, like, that doesn't know anything about wrestling or maybe just is just looking at it from an outside perspective, if they would see a male coach demonstrating on a female wrestler,
yeah,
or a male coach making comments about a female's weight,
right,
it looks really
bad
wrong.
optics is what we'd call that.
They could say that it looks wrong, but from our perspective, and we understand, and they did very good job at communicating everything the whole season, and I never once felt uncomfortable in this program.
What a great success story. Now, you named your football coaches. Who were the wrestling coaches you worked with?
So there was Coach Drew Pasley, and then Coach Dill, the one that kind of convinced me to wrestle, and then Coach Buck. We called him Papa Coach Buck, and then Coach Scott. They were all really helpful in our success stories. And, even if one coach, like I remember one time Coach Buck was trying, I couldn't get my double leg down, and I was getting frustrated, and when I get frustrated sometimes I cry. And so he was like, "What is wrong?" And he's just trying to teach me this double leg, and I felt bad. But I mean, if one coach wasn't getting it, then we had all these perspectives, and they all did a very good job at accommodating to, one, more people in the wrestling room, and two, just different styles of coaching like we talked about before. And they did an amazing job at just including us and making sure, giving us the resources we needed to succeed.
Zoe, I'm so blown away because of all the bad stuff we hear about, coaches, and that's what makes the news. This is such a cool success story that I'm very excited for you, and boy, I give those guys lots of credit.
Yes, I'm very fortunate for the coaches that I've surrounded myself with over the years.
You are very articulate. And you're obviously very thoughtful. You've given this a lot of thought, and you express it so well. Could you kind of wrap it up by just telling me what the overall experience, being with the guys, competing against guys, what's that meant to your life?
To me, not only like wrestling, but wrestling was easily the hardest thing that I have done, that I have gone through. But I can say that it was the most rewarding. So, and that goes along with football. I mean, just doing something different, something that people don't expect. And as a female, I mean, I think it's very important to show younger women especially that you can do what you set out to do. And I think that is just very important to show these days. And these experiences really shaped who I am, and I really appreciate that and everyone who's contributed to helping me and supporting me along the way.
And that's the Pirate People Podcast. Our thanks to Zoe Chrisman, North Central Missouri College softball player, member of the Pirates Digital Media broadcast staff, and a pioneer in a lot of ways in girls athletics, especially in her hometown of Brookfield, Missouri. Our Pirates People Podcast is available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio, as well as our YouTube site, Pirates Digital Media. I am Rick Cole. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye for now, and go Pirates.